Hi everyone, welcome. Come on in. Welcome to a holiday story about when I was a young boy and I discovered a magical world. This story is a tribute to the great writer C.S. Lewis, who created the wonderful world of Narnia, where I spent so much of my childhood and where I've gone back and visited all through my life. It's called The Magician's Other Nephew, or The Copper Vase, and I've written it as a sequel to C.S. Lewis's The Magician's Nephew. It's, if you like, the book he never got to write. Let me tell you how it all started. When I was 6 years old, I lived in a small road up in North London, and there was a patch of green grass across the road from my house where the older boys played football every weekend from dawn till dusk. Most days when they played, I watched from the garden gate. You see, my parents, they wouldn't let me cross because cars went by too fast, balls hit windscreens, mothers shouted. It was chaotic, too chaotic for them. They were scared. So I stood at the gate and I watched, or I pressed my face to the window, imagining myself out there with them, kicking every single ball, scoring every goal. And then, one afternoon, my parents went out. I don't remember all these years later where they went. It probably doesn't matter. I only remember the feeling, that particular childhood mixture of guilt and exhilaration. And so, looking both ways, as I'd been told, I crossed the road alone and I joined the game. It was fantastic. We played until the light began to fade. And then one by one, the other boys drifted home for tea until there were only two of us left. Me and a little boy I'd never met before, whose name, it turns out, was Stephen. Now, he lived just down the road from me, he said, and he asked me, did I want to come back to his house for tea? Of course I would. You see, in those days, parents didn't worry so much about where their children were. It's hard to explain exactly why. The world felt smaller, or perhaps just safer, and so I went. And it changed everything. We climbed the stairs to his bedroom, and that's when I saw it. A book on his shelf. The spine read, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. What? I remember standing there, staring at those words, unable to quite believe them. I mean, a lion, a witch, and a wardrobe, all in one book? How was that possible? Why? What kind of story could contain all three of those things? Can I borrow it? I asked. He said yes. I took it home and I devoured it. There's no other word really that could adequately describe what happened. I read it so quickly, under the covers with a torch, at the breakfast table, in the back of my mum's car. Within days, I was back at his house asking if I could borrow the next book. This one was called Prince Caspian. I read it. Then The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I read it. Then all the rest. I had no idea at that time that they were Christian parables. And in truth, I wouldn't have cared if I had. What I knew was that a wardrobe could be a doorway, that a world could be sung into existence, that a lion could be terrifying and gentle, both at the same time, that stories could be true in ways that really had nothing to do with whether they actually happened or not. It was a very different thing. The books stayed with me as I grew older, particularly The Magician's Nephew, which was my favourite. I read them again as a teenager and again as a young man. When I had children of my own, as the years passed, I read them the books aloud. Watching my son and my daughter fall under the same spell that C.S. Lewis had created all those years before. They asked the same questions I'd asked. Is Aslan the lion real? Will the children in the book ever go back to Narnia? I moved on as time went by onto other mythical books, particularly Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, and then onto what people call grown-up books or adult books. Although I've never been entirely sure what makes a book grown up or adult. But the Narnia stories, they never left me. They never ever left me. They sat in some room in my mind, waiting, poised. Some years ago, I had a flat in West London with a small garden, and I hired an artist to paint a portrait of what I thought Narnia looked like on my garden wall. I had an Acer plant which flowers in red only for a few months each year, exploding into crimson and then shedding everything. So I had this artist paint this mural on the wall behind the tree. It showed what I imagined Narnia might look like. A forest, a river to the sea, snow, and in the center of the mural, hidden by the Acer's leaves in summer, was the lion, Aslan. Every autumn, when the tree shed its leaves, the lion Aslan was revealed. I would stand at my window, just as I had stood at my parents' window all those years ago, and I would watch him appear. It felt like a secret, a kind of private magic, a reminder that some things are always there, even when you can't actually see them. You just know there's something waiting for you. Now, a few months ago, I was on a train going up to a football match. You might wonder what this has got to do with anything. I had my headphones in and I was listening to an audiobook to pass the time. It was The Magician's Nephew, my favourite book from the series on Narnia. It's actually the first story in the Narnia Chronicles, the story of how Narnia came to be, how it was created. And it's the adventures of Diggory Kirk and Polly Plummer. I'd heard it before. Of course, I'd read it before, many, many times. Some in childhood, some in adulthood. But something about that particular journey on the train, the rhythm of the train perhaps, the grey October, November light through the windows, it took me back. All the way back to the garden gate, to Stephen's bedroom, to the first time I held that book in my hand and realised that stories could open doors. I wept on the train. I was embarrassed about it. I put my sunglasses on to hide the tears. I can't entirely tell you why. Perhaps because some things, when you return to them after many years, show you who you've become since you last looked. Perhaps because the story itself is about creation, about a world being sung into being, sung into existence. And that particular magic, it's never really lost its hold on me. Or perhaps just because I was 6 years old once, and that boy let me borrow his book. Nothing has ever been quite the same again for me. But I knew somewhere in those tears that I wanted to write something. I wanted to write something about these books. There had to be another Nephew. That was the thought that came to me. Diggory had his adventure. But what if there was a brother, an elder brother, who went first, who vanished, who was never spoken of again? What if Diggory's story wasn't just about courage and sacrifice? What if it was also about guilt, about relief, about the complicated love between brothers, and the things we don't do because we're afraid of what it will cost us? I wanted to write a story that honoured C.S. Lewis, his voice, his style, his particular magic. I wanted to feel like it could sit beside the others on a shelf. But I also wanted it to be mine, to contain the things I've learned about storytelling, about truth dressed in narrative, about the 5-second moments that change everything. This is that story. It's called The Magician's Other Nephew, and it's a short story about what might have been. It's about a drawer that just wouldn't stay closed, a brother who was lost, and the rescue that wasn't what either of them expected it would be. And it begins, as all the best stories do, with a door that someone is afraid to open. Now here's a note to the reader, the watcher, the listener, depending on whichever platform you're using to view or listen, or maybe even read this. If you've read the other stories about Narnia, the Great Lion, the Wardrobe, and all that followed, then you will know something of Professor Diggory Kirk, though you may not have known that was his name. He was the old professor who owned the house where the 4 children, named Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy, came to stay during the war, and where Lucy first stumbled through the wardrobe into the snow and the lamppost. But this is not that story. This is the story of what happened long before the wardrobe. Indeed, long before Narnia itself even existed, and it concerns a brother whom Diggory never spoke of, and the drawer he opened every morning for 23 years without ever touching what lay inside. Part 1, The Hiding. Chapter 1, The Weight of Copper.